Welcome to Pop.0 with Bryan, Chaffin, and John Kheit.
Today is Wednesday, January 4th. It's the first show of 2018. Believe it or not, this is still a video podcast for the Mac Observer. I'm Bryan Chaffin, editor-in-chief for TMO. And that guy.
And I'm Mr. All Right. It's a gift from Jenny's sister for the Christmases.
You are Mr. I see that you even have a shirt telling us so.
That's right. There's more to it, but I'm going to try not to embarrass everyone.
Is there more to who you are, though?
There is more to who I am. People have probably seen this, so it's a very silly t-shirt, but I appreciate the gift, I think. And welcome to Pop.0.
Oh, wait, you're John Kheit. Got to tell us John Kheit.
Yeah, I'm John Kheit.
Hey, and you know what? You guys can send us an email. I'm going to say this right off the bat. You can send us an email at Pop.0 at macobserver.com.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Nice. It's not actually created yet. but by the time the vast majority of people hear this, it will have been.
I see. All right. Well, that's excellent. Good job. And since this is Pop.0, as always, we have 3 topics and we're lying. So topic number 1 is breaking news. Breaking news. Meltdown, Spectre update, and Apple responds. And you broke that story and actually posted an article just minutes ago. So kudos to you. Topic 2, real damages for Throttlegate, for which at least one of our readers, that would be interesting. How could you read a video podcast? One of our viewers, he has given the best feedback I've ever gotten, and I instantly love this viewer, even though he disagreed with me on other topics, which is I don't curse enough. So fuck yeah.
I call shenanigans on this nonsense.
So topic number 3, Star Wars.
The Last Jedi.
Topic number 4, Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise? What Tom Cruise? What are we going to talk about? What about Tom Cruise?
You asked me a question. I don't even remember how.
Oh my God, you're going to blame this on me, aren't you?
You asked me a question of, what do you think it's like to be Tom Cruise? And I'm like, that's a fucking awesome question. So, yes, it is all your fault.
All right.
All right. Let's get down to the meltdown of Spectre. To the meltdown of Spectre.
I like it. How about the Spectre of a Meltdown?
The Spectre of a Meltdown, which is, the short version is Intel and basically almost all other processors, if not all other processors, have some inherent security problems in the chips themselves, mostly to do with kind of branch, basically speculative execution. Since these have multi-core, multi-threads, these things can do one execution that might happen or might not happen, and keep a bunch of these speculative threads going at the same time, so that if they need to have been executed, they will have been pre-executed and things happen faster. But because of that, there are security holes where processes that should not be able to get a hold of one of these predictive execution threads can, and hilarity ensues. So you could imagine if one process, you're playing a video game and another process is executing something with your password in it speculatively, and the one game process can now somehow get a hold of your banking information when it shouldn't, bad things are going to happen.
Especially if it's designed to look for that.
Right. So if there's malware that you get executed one way or the other, or a bad web page with bad JavaScript that's sniffing for this kind of stuff, all of a sudden these other threads that normally they would be locked out from a security advantage, they can look right on the CPU to see if one of these predictive threads on the chip is executing and try to sniff out that stuff that it shouldn't have access to, and bad things could ensue. And this is a problem not just for Apple; it's a problem for basically
everybody. Windows, Linux, iOS, some little operating system called Android. Have you heard of that one?
Yeah.
And essentially all of the iOS, all of the OSs running on all of the processors. Though Apple says that Apple Watch is not susceptible or vulnerable to meltdown, and I'm not sure how that's possible. Which is interesting.
It almost makes you wonder, like, does that operating system, even though it has multi-cores, the new ones have multi-cores, but is that operating system almost running like the old original classic Mac OS, where it's, you know, monotasking and it doesn't do any of this stuff? It's kind of interesting. But
is it not susceptible simply because it's so primitive? That's an interesting thought.
Wonder, but I don't think that's the case. I think part of the case there is, one, it's not an Intel chip, so it can't run Meltdown. Meltdown is only Intel chips.
No, it's not. Is it?
Yes, Meltdown is only for Intel chips.
Then why was Intel saying that everybody else is affected by this too? Are they trying to lump Spectre into the same?
I think they're playing fast and loose in a marketing sense. But Spectre.
What? Okay, then why is iOS and tvOS updated to patch to mitigate against Meltdown?
It's a real good question, because both of those are ARM based, and right. Only Spectre only. So maybe there's some truth to what Intel is saying, that Meltdown does affect broader than others. But from what this isn't very old, so it's just from the blast of what we're reading around and what's been released. The high level view is that Spectre affects all CPUs, and Meltdown is more limited to Intel. And the difference is, and here I'll give a shout out to Daniel Meisler, and let me go to the page, but let me make sure I don't have.
Please.
Yes, it's not. So here we go. There's a little table that we had, and it has a nice high level comparison where Meltdown supposedly is on the Intel side, and the reason it's on the Intel side. Oh, that's lovely. Die, all you advertisers, die. Okay,
hold on. Advertisers do pay the bills. The issue is not with advertisers per se; it's with the intrusive and overburdensome level of advertising that some outlets choose to pursue.
Okay,
I say that as a publisher. If we didn't have any advertising, well, you and I might be here, but TMO would not.
Excellent. I'm thrilled for it. It's all advertisers except ours.
No, it's not that. It's like the issue is not with advertising. The issue is with intrusive advertising. The issue is with companies that make us the product. TMO does not make us the product, right? The issue is with pop-up ads that like obscure the content that you're actually trying to read or even show people in this case. But
how do you balance that? I don't know how you balance that.
That is a great question. Do we want to go down this rabbit hole?
I don't understand how you managed to get the soapbox to balance on your high horse.
Oh, I see. Right. No, that's an excellent point. Listen, I tell you, where I choose my fulcrum or my balancing. Would that be a fulcrum? Am I using the word correctly?
Fulcrum is more for leverage, but
for leveraging, right? So my balance point, my tipping point, my balance point is it's when you make people the product. For instance, I hate ad blockers, but I don't mind people blocking flash ads. Going back when flash ads were a thing, right? Flash was an alternate. Flash was an alternate technology that not everybody had to have. So if somebody is choosing to advertise with Flash, a technology that not everybody has, that's on them. But otherwise, advertising is the price we charge for the work that we do.
It goes back to what you said the other week, where you're like, I hate CBS, but I'm not going to rip off their medium because they're entitled to provide whatever kind of deal they want for consideration, and either you like it or not. And I don't like a lot of the choices. Like everyone hated pop-up ads. The guy that invented pop-ups like feels guilty to this day that he made them. And effectively what that site just did was put a JavaScript version pop-up ad in frame, which just fuck you.
Yeah, I really don't like those.
So, but your choice is then don't view the page, right? So, or view the page and then curse at it like I did. So fuck that.
Right. Those to me, both of those options to me are absolutely philosophically valid.
Yeah. So
stealing the content is not. Using an ad blocker is not. But I mean, a lot of people disagree with me on that. They're wrong, and I'm okay with that.
So, all right, back from that
rabbit hole. Sorry about that.
So, Meltdown is seemingly more. Either it's Intel only, or it's been mislabeled as Intel only because the wellspring for it is this privilege escalation,
right?
That there's a certain amount of privileges on the processor that any thread should be allowed to get, and because of a privilege escalation and bug, you can go from one thread to another and potentially get to data that you're not supposed to.
But it's weird that Apple patched iOS and tvOS against it.
Right. So what that tells me is there's some truth to what Intel is saying, because those are not Intel only processors; those are ARM processors. So maybe Meltdown is more widespread than is being reported. Spectre, which seemingly works on all processors, deals more directly. It springs from branch prediction, where you have multiple branches that are being pre-executed and predicted, and the process is able to get into one of the branches that it's not supposed to get access to. So it's a subtle difference, and I'm sure to programmers that know what they're doing, unlike myself in this case, it's probably an important difference. But right now, Apple just released a press release saying that some things have been patched. So why don't you wrote an article about that? So why don't you get into the details of that?
Oh, sure. So Apple said that Meltdown has already been patched in iOS 11.2, macOS 10.13.2, and tvOS 11.2, all of which are the most recent versions that were actually shipped, I think last week, right?
Yeah, they were.
Or even a week before that.
Correct.
Right. And they said that so there's a question I have on this, and I'm really hoping that you're more substantially more technically oriented and knowledgeable than I am. They refer to all of these not as patches, but as mitigations. And that to me says that there's either a technical reason for it, or there's a squirrely ass CYA aspect to it.
Well, so at a high level, it may just be this simple. If it's an error in the processor, they can't fix it. They can't inject a firmware update into the
that's
so it will always be a bug, and so they can.
So that would be a technical choice for the term mitigation.
But I think there's something more to the squirrely thing that you talk about, because when you get to their press release, and I'll poke it up here again, and let me blow this up so it's actually viewable by everyone. So what's interesting is they seem that so basically, right, for Meltdown, they said, look, we fixed this, don't worry about it, and our testing on benchmark shows that it really hasn't affected performance, because some of the worry in some of the early reports, and by early reports I mean like an hour ago, it seemed to suggest that it could be anywhere from a 5 to 30% hit in processing, which is pretty huge. If a third of your CPU power is dead. But Apple's position seems to be that it's had no impact on performance. And you and I have also kind of non-objectively, just through our use of the latest version of the operating system, I haven't really noticed any.
Yeah, and anecdotally, it's funny. Dave Hamilton and I and Jeff, we all noted that, because the BBC reported that macOS 10.13.2 was patched against Meltdown, right? But we didn't have any further corroboration on that. But all three of us said we're all running that version, and if it is patched for Meltdown, we're not seeing any performance hit.
Right. So in some sense, if you're a Mac user or an Apple user, you kind of don't care about Meltdown anymore, at least from a security advantage, in that it seems to have been solved. And actually, even from a performance advantage, it doesn't seem day to day the average person's going to notice much going on there. Spectre, on the other hand, is real interesting language that they used. And here's part of it. They say, look, first they kind of give a little detail, which I give them injection for the branch target infection. They said the technique makes items in the kernel available to user processes by taking advantage of a delay in the time it takes for the CPU to check the validity of the memory call. So it's funny. It's supposed to prevent this, but I guess the chip can have a delay in where the access control on this is not properly set yet, and you get in. So it's a tough thing.
That's a tough hack, exploit.
Yeah, and that colors a little bit of what they say here, but I think they're taking a little more leeway than they probably should here. But what the heck do I know? They may be completely right. But they talk about, look, they analyzed this and they said, we really think that this is a problem for JavaScript running on a web browser. And you can see why. If you have 50 web browser pages open, each of them have a thread, each of them generating lots of predictive things. And not to mention the lag that is, on a web page versus a direct process running on this, because it goes through levels of JavaScript interpretation. Lag is probably more of an issue there, and there are more web pages and more processes running at the same time, and you're more likely to encounter a malicious web page, right? Because it doesn't have to be signed to execute on the Mac like most processes are these days. The threat there is higher, and so that what they're saying is we're going to fix this in Safari. Our current indicates in upcoming Safari mitigations will have no measurable impact. And the impact will be less of 2.5% on Jetstream benchmark. So it seems one benchmark, there might be some impact, but this is yet to be fixed in
right.
The actual question is, well, hey, just because it's extremely unlikely to happen on macOS, why would you still not patch it?
Well, I see what you're saying.
Right. Yeah. And the answer may be they probably will, or one would hope they probably will, but just haven't announced it yet. Although it's weird why they wouldn't announce it all in one big kind of...
I suspect, too, that it's freaking hard.
That may be the real answer, right? Like this, I don't know. I don't know what the answer. And this gets into a bigger question that I had, and then another bigger question that you had. My question is, hey, what fucking processors can I buy that don't have this problem? Like, are the Coffee Lake things that are coming up? And it seems like the Coffee Lake ones are also affected. So this stuff, one, I don't know if it is.
No, let's examine that for a second. So a processor is what, 2 to 4 years in development before it sees the light of day?
My guess, I guess it depends what you mean by a process, whether it's an iteration step, a fab increment, or a real fundamental processor thing. I think, yeah, fundamental processor updates are probably 4 or more years, right?
That's my understanding. It's actually been a while since I've talked to anybody who knows about this issue, but I think that's about how long you're looking at for certainly for the major processor upgrades. For iterative speed improvements, though, I still think you're looking at 12 to 18 months minimum. And these vulnerabilities came to light just a few months ago. So none of the processors that we're going to see hit the market in the next, I would guess, and I hope that I'm wrong, but I really think that none of the processors that we'll see in any shipping device for the next 2 or 3 years, or at least 1 to 3 years, probably 1 to 2 years, is going to be affected by this problem, at least.
So if Apple ever comes out with a Mac Pro, the first Mac Pro will still be deficient.
Yes.
It's good to know.
So that'll be an excellent excuse for you to buy the next Mac Pro 2.
Yeah, you're right. So this is what I suspect. Some bugs in CPU are super easy to fix because they actually have a microcode that you can patch and fix. This is not a case here. Some bugs, I remember a while back there was some kind of bug with getting remember back in the Pentium days, you could get like the serial number out of a Pentium when you, in a way that I think you weren't supposed to, and they patched that in a revised chip pretty quick because it was so specific and it was an easy fix. This deals with the fundamental heart of the CPU and how it pipelines things. So in theory, it might be easy to fix if there were an easy fix for this. But my suspicion is this may be more fundamental, where they have to rethink how access control occurs through different parts of the chip, and it just might not be an easy solution. It might be like if it's just a timing thing, like they suggest on the Spectre part, like there might just be a bug and mistiming, and it might be a thing where in the pipeline we set a permission setting as step 2 or 3 in part of the process of getting this pipeline predictions going through, and you might be able to reorder that relatively easy. So it's possible they could apply a last minute patch to but a last minute change on the logic side of this for chips that have yet to be released. But I don't know. I haven't seen anyone ask the question of what chips, if any, will be free of this problem.
Right.
And if it's even possible, it might be just a thing where this is an inherent issue that has to be taken care of on the operating system, and no one thought to ever add the security feature on the operating system, and now they have to.
Or jointly, right? Like the processor makers and the operating system vendors have to work together to find a completely brand new way of doing things.
Right. And Rick scarily read my mind. It was the floating point bug. There was a software patch you could apply to fix the software floating point issue on some of the Intel processors, but it ran way slow. And then they had an update in one of the processors, and if you had the right rev, it was nice and fast again. But yeah, yeah, exactly what you said. I agree. It could be the new norm. We will see. But I guess a little credit to Apple. I think they did better than most outlets in giving a little bit of detail that's probably not fully understandable by most people, but enough to.
Well, I think they beat everybody with these updates too, these mitigations.
Yeah. So kudos for them for not following a pattern of fucking up endlessly, which we will our next topic, by the way, on security and whatnot. So let's see what. Yeah. Anyway, kudos to Apple for doing what it's supposed to. Which just shows you how Stockholm Syndrome beaten we are. Okie dokie. Do you have anything else on that?
No. Nope. I had to process. Apparently.
Number 2, Apple may have some real damages to pay for Throttlegate, and this topic is brought to you care of one of our nice viewers, Glenn. Who again?
Grant.
I'm sorry, Grant. Who claimed I did not curse enough. So I really respect Grant. And he had a bunch of points, but just like today, we had breaking news right during the shooting of the show. When Throttlegate, a lot of the news came out from Throttlegate. It was breaking when we did our last show, and I've had a little more time to think about it. And here are a couple of new thoughts I had that didn't spring to mind. And the bottom line of them is this could be horrendously expensive for Apple. And while I'm not on the same page as Grant on kind of from the
well, why don't you go over Grant's comments first?
All right, that's a good point, because if I do it from memory, it's asking for trouble. So, let me one Grant, I think generally, and if he's on, he can correct me if I'm wrong. Generally said, look, there's a bad design decision here, and there's kind of a long history of potential obfuscation by Apple for the bad design decision with regard to its batteries. And I think that actually is a very fair point at this level. Why does Apple have to throttle the battery when it seems like Samsung and others do not? Now, Samsung and others have come out and said they don't do this, right? I guess where I disagree with him is I think that the problem of Apple phones, well, maybe we're not disagreeing. Maybe we're just arguing past one another. I think it was a real problem. We saw reports of iPhones not just crapping out in the cold, but just with
shutting
older,
down, yeah.
And they're just shutting down.
They would shut down, and then you plugged it. Shut down as if they ran out of power, and you're thinking to yourself, "I had like half a battery. What's up?" And you plug it back in, and it comes back up, and there, sure enough, you got a half a battery or 3/4 of a battery. Or, you know, what gives?
Right, and it's because the peak output of the battery was too low to support the peak draw.
Right. The processor was demanding more. The phone itself was demanding more power because of processor intensive tasks, and as a defense mechanism, the phone would shut down.
Correct, and so that was a real problem. So I don't think that, you know, I'm not of the mind that Apple is playing such a long chess game to fuck over people that they made fake crashes so that people would complain and they could make this patch. I think it's
Definitely
a real problem. And
but Grant didn't suggest that.
No, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not saying he did, but my point is, I think that was a real issue, and so Apple had to make this patch. Now, he brings up a good question of, well, isn't that a design decision? Well, here's what we don't know. I don't know that let's assume Samsung is telling the truth that they don't make a patch to throttle the processor, right? And they're kind of saying they don't have this issue. What I don't know is that Samsung doesn't sell enough in one model that we know, are their phones randomly crapping out when the batteries get old, like a year and a half old, 2 years old? The answer may be no, in which case it shows that Samsung is, engineering this a little bit better. And it might be, to Rick's point, Rick's saying is, if they just put a fucking bigger battery in these things, you wouldn't have this issue come up till probably much later in the battery's lifespan.
That's where I come down squarely on that front, that this issue is a product of Apple's obsession with thinner, past the point where people are
give a fuck.
Yeah.
And so that may be a fair and legitimate point on an engineering side, that if no one else is having this problem, I'm not saying it's an illegitimate issue. The phone's crapping out and just bombing is real. But why aren't they doing what others are doing, right? So they don't have to throttle. And if it's just put a bigger battery, then that's great. And Grant just said Samsung got caught only not throttling when benchmarks were running.
Yeah, that's
so who knows?
Fuck Samsung. Can I please, if we're going to emphasize cursing in this particular episode, fuck Samsung, fuck them hard, fuck them, fuck that company. That fucking company fucking sucks. They're a bunch of fucking secondhander, fucking IP stealing bunch of fucking bastards. Fuck them. Go, please go ahead.
Yeah, ditto. I can't disagree with them. I would buy, if I was doing Android stuff, I would buy from a different vendor. But we digress a touch. So there is some technical fuzziness there that Apple has not clarified, and so I think Grant has a fantastic point in saying that is definitely not above being questioned. So, but here's where I think there's huge damages, and I didn't think this through when we got the news the first time, and which is, it's not just a notification issue. I mean, in some sense it is, because if they just said this before, as they release the operating system, that henceforth when your battery is over a year old or 80% wear and tear on it, it's going to be throttled down. Well, then everybody would know that, right? But here's the damages. By not knowing, people, and we have friends in our tech group and whatnot, that they're like, fuck this phone, it feels a lot slower, and they had no idea why, and they do a fresh install and it was still running slow, and then for a lot of them the answer was, well, I'm just going to get a new phone. And for some portion of those people, the argument that the attorneys are going to have, of course, the attorneys are going to say 100% of people that bought a new phone, that had an older phone, they bought the phone and they would not have bought it if this throttling didn't occur and if they could have just replaced the battery. So for that percentage of people that upgraded every year, and I guess when did 10 point, that operating system, when they added this patch, come out? Was it 2 years ago at this point?
No, it was earlier this year. It was 10. It was 10 to 10.2, I think, or 10.2.1 or 10.1.2. Anyway, it was iOS 10. It was in February.
So if it's, let's just call it roughly a year. So a year's worth of upgrades is the potential pool size for this, right? That they've been throttling. And so the answer is, let's just say that on average, a person spent $600 to upgrade when $80 would have done. So they're down $520 that they're due, that they felt that they needed to upgrade on this. All right, now obviously not all the people upgrade just to deal with the battery issues, but you start adding that up, all of a sudden you're talking billions and billions of dollars of people that legitimately said, I can't deal with this phone, and the phone was actually fine, but for the battery and but for them not being informed of this. So it's a lot of damages. I'm not sure what it is.
Potentially a lot of damages.
Yeah, it's potentially a lot of damages. They'll be lucky to settle this if they get away with like a $5 billion bill.
Yeah.
On this.
I wrote a piece today saying don't go spending Apple's billions that they're bringing in from overseas, because people are like, oh, they're going to buy Netflix and they should make some big M&A purchases, and I'm like, this is just ridiculous. It's not going to happen, and don't start spending their money, because what Apple's going to do is they're going to bring it back. They might pay off some debt, and they're going to give the rest to shareholders, maybe some employee bonuses, and
litigation damages.
And yeah, but now I need to go back and edit that piece and say what they're really going to do is they're going to end up paying it out in settlements for Throttlegate.
By the way, I did a little bit of research on that, and the tax, annoyingly, the U.S. is the only country in the world that does this. But the tax is, whether they bring the money or back, they're getting hit with that 15.5% tax. On the money.
Wait, it's 8.8% on property?
It's 8.8 on illiquid assets and 15.5% on liquid assets.
Yeah, okay.
And stocks and things of that nature are considered liquid, and obviously cash, bonds, kind of short-term paper, right, which is mostly what Apple holds. So most of it's going to be at 15.5, and they're going to get taxed for it. I always found that the U.S. is, in some sense, some people will say it's fair because the U.S. government has always done that to individuals, which I find horrendous. So if you go to work to Germany for 5 years and you don't live in America at all, and all your income and whatever and infrastructure is being done by Germany, you still will pay U.S. tax on top of the German tax you pay, which is just
wait a minute though. When I knew someone who lived in Japan for 2 years, and she didn't have to pay tax. She didn't have to pay any U.S. taxes at all.
That's not the way it works. So there's a threshold, like under X amount of salary, you might be withheld.
Oh, I see. Right.
After X more, you will pay. But the problem is with doing this for a corporation, way over a person, because a person generally is living in 1 or 2 countries, usually, right? Where this might be an issue. A corporation, you could think about it, gets to 100 countries, right? If 100 countries do this, they're going to be taxed more than 100% of their income by the time all it's done. It's just a stupid thing in an arrogance by this.
But they still don't. They don't have to pay. They don't have to pay what they've paid elsewhere, right? If they the taxes that they've paid to a foreign government get deducted from the 15%.
They've already, the 200 million that they have abroad, they've already paid full taxes in wherever the jurisdiction there is. 15.5 is on top of what they've already paid.
Okay, back up, because when they earned those profits, most of them were earned in countries with low income tax. Hold on. Let me get this out. With low income tax rates, and they were accruing debt to cover U.S. income taxes already. So this is a reduction in the amount of U.S. income tax that they would have owed on this money. They've already, Apple at least has already accounted for paying U.S. taxes on all that money sitting overseas. Apple has I think $30 or $40 billion set aside to cover those taxes.
But they set aside the money is irrelevant. What you save for and what.
But my point is, that Apple already owed money. They already owed U.S. income tax on this money.
Of the 200 billion, about 130 billion is still untaxed in any way by the U.S. government. So some portion of the 200 billion, roughly, let's say 70 billion, they had taxes because of God knows what machinations are going on, right? Because it's parts and IP and whatever else is going on there. But 130 billion of it was pure, already fully paid for in the foreign jurisdiction, that you don't like what the foreign jurisdiction's tax rate is.
I'm not getting into that aspect of it. I'm not trying to have that argument with you. The argument I'm trying to have with you is that Apple, my understanding is that Apple already owed 35% on that $200 billion or the $250 billion that they've got overseas.
Why would they owe that if it was earned overseas is the point.
Well, okay, that's a separate argument, but that actually is a separate argument.
Yeah, it's a reduction. If your overall point is to say this 15% is better than the 35% they would have had to pay had they repatriated it before this tax bill. Well, yes, that's true.
So now it's 15% whether or not they repatriate it,
exactly,
instead of 35% when they repatriate it.
Which makes America a global taxer. And if other countries follow suit, if every country decides I'm going to tax any company that works here on their foreign income and stuff that they do completely outside of this country, you could see that will add up to a
it's because Apple has a U.S. headquarters, right? So the only thing that Germany could tax that way would be Apple Germany.
No, Apple Germany can also say, you know what? The 300 million that you have outside of 300 billion that you have outside
that would be fought out. That would be fought out in the global courts.
But it's exactly what the U.S. just did.
No, but the U.S. is saying that U.S. corporations owe money on the profits they earn overseas because they're still U.S. profits because they're U.S. companies.
No, they're totally not dealing with any infrastructure. They're 100% on stuff that's manufactured, made, and sold abroad.
Okay, so you agree with me that Apple should be paying more taxes in the local districts where they actually do business. Well, I accept your apology, sir.
Paid 100% of the taxes that were owed in those districts, and now the U.S. government is saying, "Well, we don't give a shit. We're still taxing you for stuff that you had nothing to do with the United States."
Yeah. Okay. All right. Now, it would just be much better if no one paid any taxes. That'd just be fantastic.
Well,
okay, you're not saying that. That was completely ridiculous for me to try to suggest you are saying it. We have a fundamental disagreement here.
Yeah. Okay. So I hope that, you know what, every country in the world does this, because
every country in the world is not going to do this.
Why is America so special that we get to charge taxes on shit that happens that has nothing to do with us?
Because it's U.S. corporations. Apple isn't taxing. Apple isn't taxing Rosneft.
So Samsung is a Korean corporation, and it's now going to charge not just the local profits that are made there and stuff that's brought in, stuff that Samsung completely works out outside of the country, and it's going to tax on that. And then Japan's going to do that, and every other country is going to do that.
Okay, that's ridiculous.
America's done.
No, it is not at all what America is doing with this.
Yes. How is
not?
If Samsung
Korea USA has to pay
taxes on all products made, sold, and profit and held here in the U.S. and not brought back, how is that any different?
Samsung USA pays income tax to, and whatever, payroll taxes, et cetera, to the United States government and to any local governments as appropriate. Just like
if Samsung,
South Korea pays taxes on business done in South Korea.
That is incorrect. Samsung does not charge taxes on money that's made from Samsung USA and kept here.
America is taxing Samsung USA. Samsung USA has to file income taxes.
You're missing the point.
No, you're missing the point.
America charged American rates here for Samsung USA, but Samsung Korea,
correct,
not get charged,
correct,
for all the profits and money that were made.
You know who does charge? You know who does charge them tax? South Korea.
No, South Korea does not charge them on all the money made here in the U.S. and not brought back in.
Are you sure about that?
Yes, that's the way it works everywhere. That's what U.S. is basically saying. We're a global taxer. No, it doesn't matter where you are, what you do. We get to tax you.
Well, I can't refute that. I don't know if I would be shocked if that's actually how it works. If you happen to know that's how it works, I'm gonna have to think about that.
And it's a subtle change, but it's a big one. So in some sense, they make it seem like, oh, we've given such a lower tax rate, and it is. But the point is, as long as you never dealt with it, you weren't being double taxed by yet another government.
Well, maybe Apple can drown its sorrows in the 15% that it's also not having to pay in the States too. Maybe somehow Apple will find a way to wallow through its difficulty here.
Yeah, you know what? I hope that a few governments just decide to fucking charge Bryan Chaffin extra tax, even though you haven't done shit there. And just, if you ever step foot in those countries, tough shit.
Blood from a stone, blood from a turnip, or whatever the.
Well, that clearly makes it right. That clearly makes it right.
It makes it irrelevant. It makes your point.
No, it doesn't make it irrelevant. You can't be taxed by like entities that you have nothing to do with. It's stupid. It's stupid. America had dick to do with whatever the fuck happened in Europe. I'm making this money.
You think that Apple USA had dick to do with money that was made in Europe or Japan or China or anywhere else?
That's right.
Okay.
It had to do with it.
All right. Sure.
All right. Well, then every other country feels that they also totally are entitled. And so when every other fucking country, when 300 countries just charge the fuck out of a company for stuff that's done completely outside their country, they're going to say, well, I also feel entitled to it.
Your argument makes no sense.
Of course it does.
Apple is a U.S. corporation. Samsung is a South Korean corporation.
Apple Europe is a European corporation. Apple Japan is a fucking Japanese corporation. And it does shit outside of this country.
Yeah, but it's still Apple. The headquarters, the products are designed here, etc. Right?
Okay,
the company operates here.
So then
Apple USA has everything to do with what happens everywhere else with Apple and the rest of the world.
So then when they do stuff outside the world, those taxes don't get taxed? Or you just think it's cool that Apple gets taxed in addition to every locality that it works into, wherever it has a headquarters. In addition,
what's your question?
So it's cool that Apple gets double taxed or triple taxed because any place that has a headquarters now deserves to fucking lodge a tax on.
It's not a double taxation, man.
It is.
It's not a double taxation. The money that they're paying elsewhere that comes out of what they have to pay here.
They paid 60% taxes in some fucking EU country, and now they're going to pay another 15% on it.
Apple Incorporated still has the money. Apple Incorporated still has the money. The profits are being made here by Apple USA.
I don't understand how you can't understand this. They weren't paying.
I don't understand how you can't understand this.
They pay tax in Europe, and they kept the money in Europe. It's got nothing to do with fucking America. And now Apple's like, well, we don't give a fuck. We're just
okay, but that's fundamentally wrong. It has everything to do with fucking America. That fucking Apple is based here. Apple does its business here. How can you fucking say that they're separated somehow? Apple Incorporated has the profits.
So when Samsung sells its shit here, Samsung is a Korean corporation. It's housed there, and it sells them profits here, keeps the money here. It's totally cool for Korea to tax again here in the U.S. Even though
if that's the way Korea wants to do it, sure.
Okay.
And by the way, I assume that is the way Korea does it.
No, that is not. But so then
nothing else that you're saying is making any sense. So I'm finding it very difficult to accept that.
All right.
But you may be right. Actually, I don't No, I'm only assuming, and asking you and me and all that sort of thing. But the rest of what you're saying makes no sense to me.
Okay, well, what can I tell you? So when every other country in the world that has any touch of operations of one company decides they feel that they're entitled to pull any taxes from extraterritorial activities into their own country, then that's fair. You see how that works out?
That countries where a company is based can tax those companies.
Oh, I'm glad that the rule that you feel that the rule of reason by Bryan Chaffin is the way that will happen. The fact that Apple decides the U.S. government sua sponte says, well, because of the main company being here, we decided that we have the right to tax extraterritorially. Another country, therefore, cannot say, well, just because there are any operations here, we can tax extraterritorially. That's totally the way it works. Let's agree to disagree per Rick's advice on this, since we weren't even supposed to be on this topic. And let's just say you're not right.
You can say that.
Okay. And I did. So topic number 2, anyway, which is a roundabout way of saying, getting back to the topic, is that Apple may have some real damages here because the lack of knowledge could have, let's say 10 or 15% of the people that upgraded in this last year that felt their phone was slow. That's a pretty big class of people. So billions of dollars potentially. And any more thoughts on the Throttlegate thing?
I think Apple has some trouble on its hand with this issue, and it's all because they didn't disclose what they were doing.
Yeah.
Wait, I do have one more point. I get really pissed off every time I see something that says Apple is slowing down old phones, full stop. That it really annoys me because it's technically inaccurate. Apple is slowing down old phones with degraded batteries, full stop. Right. And it is not just a pedantic or semantic distinction. It is extraordinarily significant to the discussion. So, and I'm getting tired of that.
And I'm going to try to get out of my own little bubble here to Grant, to go back to one of Grant's points. And Rick is saying you have to prove intent. I'm not sure intent is at least intent on Apple's part is what you have to do, because it's just harm. It's have people relied to their detriment on Apple's representations or misrepresentations, regardless of the intent. And if people felt like the phone was just slow and they upgraded it, they suffer damage if the lawyers can prove that they would have otherwise just taken an $80 battery upgrade, which I'm sure for some portion of that pool will be true. A lot of people are like, I'm fine with the iPhone 6. I just want, to be snappy like it used to be. And yeah, so it's a big pool of potential damages. And with regard to, I don't give a damn about this because I just upgrade my phone every year, so I don't really experience this. But and I'm fortunate enough that as part of my job, I can get a new phone every year. If this is an expensive piece of kit for a lot of people that go, that really stretch to get an iPhone, that for them this is their bit of luxury, and I could see a lot of feeling of betrayal, right? And to your earlier point, where this feeds into a lot of the Apple haters kind of storyline that Apple is just this evil corporation that wants to do this for ill. And yeah, I could see being really just pissed off by this, where you're just like, you know what, fuck this. I'm going to go over to Android. This is kind of a pretty heavy betrayal. And I think it is a good, there is this high level question. And I'd love to see Apple answer this at some point. Why does Apple have to throttle when the other phone makers seemingly don't? There should be some technical explanation for it.
That is true. Well, one of the things you raised in the pre-show was that it's just possible that no one's ever noticed anything on the competing devices because none of them sell. No individual product sells in very significant numbers, and they're often viewed as disposable to begin with. Right? I mean, like, no one. Like, how many Samsung Galaxy 6s are out there in use? I mean, maybe I'm just living in a bubble somewhere, but I don't think there's that many.
Well, part of the issue is that they don't sell any one model with a great volume. So
that's what I mean.
Yeah, and so if the top model sells 4 million units in its lifetime, it's hard. It's not as an important thing for people to track. I'm not sure I fully understand Rick's point that it makes the pundits look bad, and that I'm not sure if it's the pundits espouse they weren't doing this, but oh yeah, I guess if the pundits came in to defend them, and maybe
I have said repeatedly that Apple is not slowing down your phone in order to make you want to need to upgrade. I've said that's ridiculous, but I mean, it's not Apple's responsibility to protect my reputation. So I accept that, and it turns out that I was right. Excuse me, I still stand by the statement that Apple is not slowing down phones to make you upgrade. It turns out that for the last 10 months, they have been slowing down phones with degraded batteries for a very technical reason. But this bullshit about Apple slowing down old phones to make you upgrade has been present for years, long before Apple was actually doing this.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is February, so it's a year roughly of this.
We've been hearing this since like the iPhone 5S, and like people with an iPhone 3G or an iPhone 4 or an iPhone 4S would say that Apple slow down their phone to make them upgrade.
Yeah. So Grant, he has another good point. It's like, how the hell is an 80% wear and tear? Like, so 80% is not a bad battery life, right? At least it seems like. And I don't.
Yeah, I've seen some technical explanations of that. From the standpoint of the way batteries work, 80% is actually significant, and that's true for all batteries.
So, but this is to somewhat counter Grant's point. Is what Apple had to deal with. We have people in our tech group that have phones that are at 30% of their original capacity. So you could assume that they are not unique. So Apple has this sea of craziness, right? Of people that have 20%, 30% life wear on the battery, which is really when you think about it, good luck starting your car with a battery that has 30% left on the battery. It's probably not going to turn over. So that it runs at all is kind of a minor miracle. But again, it gets into, I think, people, so I don't want to diminish. I think Grant's point is valid in that, again, why does it not seem to be an issue on other phones? And if it is, Apple should bring it, to our attention that it actually is, and other phones randomly shut down. And if it isn't, then what the fuck is Apple doing with all its big brains in engineering their phones that they're the only ones subject to this shit?
Yeah, I'll answer to that.
Yeah, and I think it's a super fair question by Grant. And I think Grant's also pointing out that, look, you're devaluing a series of phones because once the perception is that they're shit performers, and actually they weren't. They were fine just if you had a better battery on them. But here's the other thing that I thought of, which is, isn't there kind of purported best performance? Because usually every time there's benchmarks and whatnot that are done on the Apple processors and phones, they win. They win by performance. And that's one of the points of buying an Apple phone. But it'd be kind of like telling me, like, hey, that new sports car you got, it's going to have a 0 to 60 time of 3 seconds for the first year. And then afterwards, fuck you. It's just, it'll run as fast as a Honda Civic. Which, if you knew was the case, you might not buy that car. And so is the performance real when the performance relies on such a thin sliver of engineering that it's only good for that short amount of time?
Well, I'd like to see some percentages on number of phones actually affected. Is this 10% of the iPhones? Is it 90% of the iPhones?
Well, the good news is we will find out, because this is all going to come out during these cases, right? And a lot of these cases,
that's true.
Public, so we will learn just how bad this is. But I want, I will take Rick's criticism. Not that I'm claiming to be a pundit, but personally, in that my first knee-jerk reaction that it's kind of no big deal was just a lack of notice. It was wrong and insensitive on my part, in that
was Grant's criticism.
Rick just criticized me for that too.
Oh, okay.
So if it's whatever, all the people's criticism, in that it's a bit in my bubble. One, that it generally doesn't affect me, but two, that it was only an informational thing. In this case, it's true, it's informational was the real letdown, but the information led to reasonable reliance to the detriment of a lot of users that had to spend extra money that they may have not really wanted or should have spent on phones to speed them up, that shouldn't have otherwise. So Apple's got some serious damages on this.
Grant also just Grant and Rick are the stars of the show, I think. This episode, I mean, he just had a great point that kind of dovetails into one of your criticisms, and that's that how many people would hold on to an iPhone 6 because there was nothing new in the industrial design.
Well, yeah, we bitched about that for quite a long time. It's 4 years of the same design phone. I mean, the iPhone 8 is still the iPhone 6, basically, in the actual design. So it's pretty sad in that regard. Anyway, fair criticisms. My bad. I should have bitched more about them, which is a rare thing for me not to do. So.
All right. Well, let's. We have gone down a couple rabbit holes, so let's get on to The Last Jedi.
Star
Wars, didn't you?
Yeah. For everybody, there will be spoilers. So if you haven't seen this and you haven't wanted to kill yourself listening to our tax debate, pull the eject button. So I'm gonna roughly recall my grading system for all the Star Wars films thus far, because I could do it quickly. It was basically, so episode 1 F, episode 2 F, episode 3 D-, episode 3.5 was a I think it was like a C-, episode 4 A, episode 5 A, episode 6, which was Return of the Jedi, was B+. Episode 7 for me was, I believe, was a D- as well.
Hate the first 3. I liked Rogue One. I thought Rogue One was terrific.
That's episode 3.5.
Yeah. Love episode 4. Like episode 5. Hate the teddy bears in space. I mean, Muppets on Parade. I mean,
Return of the Jedi.
Return of the Jedi, right. I have enjoyed the Force Awakens. I enjoyed the Force Awakens, and I enjoyed the Last Jedi too. But I said very specifically that the Last Jedi is a mix of great, groan-inducing, embarrassment, and good. It's a mix of those 4 things.
So episode 8, is it right? Yeah, I guess it's episode 8. What the hell is this? The Last Jedi?
Last Jedi, yeah.
Yeah, I'm still trying to fully digest it. I only saw it last night. I can tell you parts of it were so riveting that Jenny fell asleep, and I had to wake her to get the last.
At the theater?
Yes, in the movie theater.
Excellent.
It was a rehash of too many things. It was the first thing that hit me. The whole, why are we repeating Luke becoming Obi-Wan?
Dude, all of the Star Wars have rehashed stuff. Return of the Jedi was a rehash of the first Star Wars, for instance.
I disagree that they were to the same extent, and I'll give credit to the episodes I hate the most. Episodes 1, 2, and 3 were at least different stories. I don't know what those stories were. They was boring as fuck, but they were different.
They had great fight scenes though.
Yeah, I mean, from a technical standpoint, it's a masterpiece. Of course, the effects, whatever the CGI for Leia was much better than the CGI for the creepy dude in the previous episode. It wasn't nearly as noticeable.
Yep.
Jenny coming to defend herself. You don't have to defend yourself. It was the movie, not you. Anyway, so. But all right, it's fine if you feel like it's all fair and good, but it just was too. I think Mark Hamill's part was so poorly written, and there were so many opportunities lost, and they took almost the most like cliched, easy, banal route with him. I found the main character, the character I like the most is it Finn? I think it's Finn.
Yeah.
And the main character, I forget her name.
Ray.
I just don't care about her, and I don't know if it's the actress or the writing. I think it's more the writing.
I love the actress. I think in this particular episode, she was an afterthought, a bizarre afterthought. I also thought that Mark Hamill, I thought he was awesome.
I think he was way better than the role that was written for him was.
Okay. All right. I'll accept that.
He was a way better actor than the writers. They could have done so much more with him.
Well, I mean, he was criticized. His acting in the original Star Wars is not very good. Right. I love the original Star Wars. I love the original Star Wars. I love it. 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 And including, I love him. But his acting isn't all that great. And I thought he was a great actor in this one. I just thought he was super compelling. I also thought that Kylo Ren was very compelling.
You and I disagree about his acting. I thought it was fantastic in the first one because it brought a genuinely non-actorish performance. If you've ever, if you ever kind of watch cinema and the acting style before Marlon Brando came in, right? It was this 1940s over the top, over expressive, over emotive. It's like I'm on the stage, shit acting that there's no realism in it whatsoever. And then you see Marlon Brando interacting with movies of that era, and they look fucking lost because this guy is much more of a genuine presence. He still, by normal human being standards, is still acting, but it was much more of a realism in how a person might react, which is always off. Anyone you meet on the street is fucking weird. It's rare to encounter what is projected by the media to be the totally normal human being. Every one of us is fucking psychotic on some level or another, and that weird comes out. And to me, Luke showed that. There was kind of the naivete. I don't know if it was an act or if it was really part of him, came through, and it was really.
I don't know, man. I saw Corvette Summer. I think that was the real Mark Hamill.
Corvette Summer, I saw it too. What a fucking awesome movie that was!
Oh my god, it's a terrible movie.
But for some reason, this is what I give to a good director. A good director sees, oh my god, look at the shit show I have. How can I package this shit show that it actually is a strength versus a weakness? And in my opinion, in Star Wars, and it clearly did not happen in Corvette Summer, right? Or whatever the fuck that movie is. And so there's some of that, like the direction went to shit. And I think the direction here, they didn't use Mark in this case was fantastic and totally not used in a way that was fantastic. And so there's only so much he could have done. So I found it derivative. I found the first half of the movie incredibly boring. The fight scenes, of course, are really interesting and good. The highlight of the movie for me was part of a fight scene, and it was the scene, again, spoilers, where the ship turns and they fucking hyperspace right through the shit, which was great. Right?
It was great, but it's like shouldn't actually do that. Like if you're in hyperspace, you wouldn't be able to affect.
I've always wondered that. That's
matter around you. I mean, and that's just one of about 1,000 plot holes that were in this movie.
Is that true? Like if you're folding space, isn't the stuff in your path folded for you?
Well, it depends on which version of quote unquote hyperspace we're talking about, right? This is sci-fi staple. Sometimes faster than light travel is done by folding space around it, or you're doing some kind of wormhole thing. I've always understood, and I'm not quite a big enough Star Wars nerd to really know if I know what I'm talking about here, but I've always felt that Star Wars was taking the path that hyperspace was essentially sort of a different space. It was like almost like a different dimension, but not a different dimension.
So I don't know what the answer is, and maybe
actually here's the way to think about it, right? So in the first Star Wars, they come out of hyperspace in Alderaan, and they're surprised because there's all this debris everywhere, right? Notice that they weren't like those rocks weren't blowing them up, and when they were still in hyperspace, because they were flying through debris up until the split second that they left hyperspace. If it's some sort of,
but then what's the
path through real space?
Then what's the point of having that super calculation to get through hyperspace? It's always, in my opinion, was to avoid matter, right? That you might fly through.
No one has ever said that. It's never. That's not what you're calculating. You're not calculating to avoid, because you don't know what matter is 20 light years away. You have no idea.
Yeah. Well, what are you calculating for then?
Shh. You're calculating for hyperspace, dude.
All right. I don't know what the fuck that means. I always thought that, if there's a warp field, and I always thought hyperspace was folding. So maybe it's a misconception, was folding space in front of me. And if the warp field is like 1 millimeter in front of your thing, then what happened?
Yeah, they're not doing that. That's actually kind of similar to what Alcubierre has theorized, which is the faster than light travel I use in my own sci-fi novel that I'm shopping right now. And it's the idea that basically you bend space and you surf it.
Right.
And but that's not what Star Wars' hyperspace is, and it's not what Star Trek does with
really
warp speed either.
Exactly what Star Trek was. So that the nacelles were warping space around the ship, and then compressing it in front and expanding it behind you.
That's not my understanding. Star Wars could be. Have you read that somewhere?
Star Trek. That's my understanding of Star Trek.
Oh, it wasn't my understanding of Star Trek either, but I may have missed something.
Yeah. Well, there is a scenario, the one that I suggested. If you warp space around the ship to like cling wrap, right, where it's only 1 millimeter thick, that means you've warped it infinitely there, and then you could accelerate through. But another possibility is, what if the calculation was you were warping space from where you are all the way to your destination? Like the warp field could be that big. You're blowing a wormhole, like just.
Well, that would be instantaneous travel.
Yes. Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, so there wouldn't be a lot of.
Let's talk about the fact that Snoke's throne room looked like an abstract set from a musical in 1957.
Yeah, it was very. I guess they were going for some almost Nazi-ish.
Yeah, but there was. It was too bare and minimal, and I mean it was like a musical set from a movie. It was a set from a musical. I kept expecting the I forget what they call it, the Mandalorians, I think is what they're called, but I kept expecting the guys in red armor to start breaking into a dance number.
Kylo was so I agree. I didn't think about it, but I guess I was bothered by so many other things. In retrospect, I agree. Kylo was interesting. I like the actor. I think the actor that plays Kylo,
Adam Driver's great,
is a good actor, and he brings that strange. You know what I mean? There's something off with him, and there's something very like this is a weird human being you might bring, and I like actors like that. So I like him, but again, I don't know that the writing did him justice.
No, it didn't. One of my favorite moments, by the way, was the standoff between him and Luke Skywalker. And the reason why I liked it so much was the poses that they both struck as actors, and they were just these incredibly, compelling poses, and the posture, and it was both of them were very commanding on the screen during that standoff.
for some reason, I feel like this whole notion that he had this cult of Vader also is just bad writing. It's just weird. It's like an excuse to introduce a helmet and then ding the helmet up. I don't get what that side. It doesn't add to the weirdness of his character. His character has enough cool weirdness without needing that. So I don't get it.
I think that was the current. I don't know. I've never heard anything said about this, but my immediate feeling about that was that it was the current director hating J.J. Abrams' decision to go with the mask and to go with this Vader light kind of thing.
Yeah, interesting. So
how about the idea that somehow the First Order is not going to be looking for little ships going off of the main ship?
All right, so
because that was fucking retarded, man.
Because they don't have the equivalent of like radar or tracking or anything like that in the future.
That was fucking retarded.
So hold on. I got a really fundamental thing that maybe you could correct. All right. So Return of the Jedi, I know you don't like it or whatever, but they win, right? They blow up the big fucking thing. They're dancing, fucking Ewoks are dancing. Yoda's there. It's fucking Darth Vader's there having a good time at the cookout in his glowing spiritual.
I hated that too. Yeah.
We win.
Yay.
So what I don't get is how did things get so fucked up after they won? Or was that all just we won a small battle, but the Empire is still around and we still got to fucking deal with these guys because they killed the Emperor, right? Yep. So there's no backstory to how did you fuck it up? You won. You fucking won. Like, why am I rooting for the most incompetent rebels on the planet?
Yeah, you know what it should have been.
You lost. What happened?
These movies should have been the First Order coming to destroy the New Republic. Not the First Order is somehow magically in power and all of a sudden we're telling the same goddamn story.
Right, so maybe then I'm not the only one fucking confused. Like, what the fuck happened that these incompetents lost after they fucking won?
Okay, I have another one for you. How about the we're the last of the rebellion, yet we have to get word out to our allies in the Rim. Either you're the last of the rebellion or you're not the last of the rebellion.
All right, Mr. Pedantic.
No, that's just stupid, man. That's not just pedantry. It's just stupid. It's lazy. It's lazy. Why, by the way, do they need to take a landing force down to this planet to blast it open? Why not just blast it from space with a big old ship? That's stupid. That's lazy storytelling. Okay, here, check this out, right? Check this out. So we have this ridiculous concept that the First Order somehow isn't looking. They're not bothering to look for little ships coming off the big ship, right? They're just not even looking for it. So all these transporters are going to be able to escape because the First Order is just not looking for them. Okay, that's fucking retarded, right? But
wait.
I've got to
wait.
What?
It's incredible that they're not looking for them while they are literally targeting and firing on the ship from which they escaped.
Yes, it's okay. So it's completely ridiculous, right? Here's a much better idea. Oh my God, we have a secret cloaking device, right? We know you've never heard of a cloaking device before, but we've got one and it works and it's going to be great. So we're going to use our cloaking device. And this was our plan the entire time, is that they end up chasing us, chasing the ships down. They destroy the ships and they think that they won. Meanwhile, we've used our cloaking device to get these transport down to this other rebel base where we start all over, right? Okay, that makes sense so far, right? So now, all of a sudden, the First Order, though, they're betrayed by Benicio del Toro, right?
Right.
They're betrayed by him, and so that they know that somehow they've got some kind of cloaking device, and they've left the ship. So what does the First Order do? The First Order has to start sending random shots, just like an old submarine movie. And you know how a big part of what was driving the fight scenes in the first Star Wars was George Lucas wanting to recreate the magic of World War II dogfight movies. Well, now all of a sudden we have the submarine thing where you're worried about the depth charges because the First Order can't see the cloaked ships, so they're just having to fire hoping to catch them, right? Yeah. And so now every time there's a shot, the people are like waiting to see if it's going to kill them because they don't know. That is more exciting. It's more logical. It makes sense. It taps the same sort of World War II recreation stuff that was driving Lucas in the first place. And most of all, it doesn't suck.
So my big pet peeve.
Do you understand what I'm saying, though?
I totally.
That would have been so much more exciting. Every time they fired, we'd be worried. We'd be waiting for it to,
So one of the few places in life where if we don't agree often enough, where Jeff and I rarely agree, which is our love of the animated series. The Clone Wars, I'm not as big a fan as he is of them, and now the Rebels version of the animated series, Star Wars animated series. The direction and storytelling really advances a story in a way that neither of these two episodes, in my opinion, have. And the directors and the writers, who I guess feel that they're more free because it's an animated series, really have been more creative. And if you skip, in my opinion, 7/8 of the Clone Wars and you just catch the last eighth of it when Darth Vader's kind of introduced the plotline, it's magical level writing. And that series ever since has, I thought, caught its stride. And there's really big creative people. And part of what I think was great about the original Star Wars was it was a breath of fresh air. It was fresh ideas from this crazy director, producer, from these actors. And somehow it became more than the sum of its parts. Even though he looked to the Errol Flynn movies and the dogfight movies, he created something new and great. And you wonder, like, why don't any of these guys that were in the animated series get a chance to do it? Because the writing there was pretty awesome, and it proved it. But they went with stuff that was just more conservative and more. It has, in my opinion, the Spider-Man problem.
It has a bigger problem. The problem is J.J. Abrams.
Well, he was only a producer in this one,
right? But he set everything in motion, and J.J. Abrams is really good on. He's really good on small picture things, and he sucks on the big picture. He's not very good with story. He's not very good with loose ends. He's not very good with plot holes. And I love his Star Trek reboots tremendously. But I think that a lot of he wasn't even a Star Wars fan when he started doing this project.
Yeah, I don't know that you need to be a Star Wars fan, but I was originally of the same mind as you about his Star Trek reboot, and I am about the original reboot. He did a great job rebooting it, and he, in that case, he actually did pay enough attention to at least some of the potential inconsistencies with starting, a whole new, universe of shit. But where it sucks is, I think we've had 3 or 4 movies in a billion years at this point, and he's barely advanced the story since the new, you know what I mean? There's no new series that has come out. These guys, all the actors from the original reboot are going to be so fucking old by the time the next movie comes in. And yet the plot has not advanced very far from that reboot. And maybe that's not his fault. It's just, there's no money in it, and you really need a television show to kind of give a good new story arc. But we've had, I think it's just 3 episodes or 3 movies, and the story has not advanced, is my point.
Right.
The reboot was good, but then the story hasn't advanced.
But see, I don't think what I think that's actually by design. I believe that they're looking at the movies as the Monster of the Week episode format. So we're getting a single series, a single season over the course of several years. Short season at that.
Again, at this rate, in another
I'm with you. I would rather see the story advance.
So anyway, overall, I don't know if these are, in some sense, they're worse because then the episode.
Grant says Star Wars isn't worth this much analysis. I disagree with that premise, but we have gone on with this for a while.
Yeah. Anyway, just to put a bow on it, I'm not sure yet. These might be worse than this episode. Might be worse than any of the original, not the original, any of episodes 1, 2, and 3, the prequels, because they're so fucking unoriginal, and I so don't give a shit about most of the characters. Oh, one thing that I know that will probably annoy you: What'd you think of the cutie characters and the use of Chewbacca in this movie?
Superfluous and pointless. And I hate the cute stuff. Although Gamut was telling me that the reason why they had those things was because of the peregrine penguins that are all over that island where it was being filmed. And though the cute characters were created because they couldn't get rid of the penguins out of the shot, I would say that if you can put something on top of the penguins, you can take the penguins out. So, you know, fuck the little things, the seal penguin thingies.
I don't mind comic relief and little cutie things here and there, but like I don't know that they were well used. And to me, it's sad that a great character like Chewbacca is so underutilized. I mean, he's basically a glorified Uber driver.
Yeah, there were just so many stupid tangents and, you know, ham-fisted storytelling and Poe's like learning how to be a commander. It was just so ham-fisted. I mean, like it's like I felt like I had the director, like, you know, eating story and then, like, you know, telling me to open my mouth so that he could like regurgitate it into my mouth. And the trip to the casino was pointless. I mean, there was just so many pointless aspects to the entire thing. I saw one criticism complaining about Rose, that would be the young Asian woman who became friends with Finn, and how he's going to go sacrifice himself, and then she stops him from saving the day. And why? What's the point? Like, there were just so many things that were just not the point of what's the point?
You know what disappoints me the most? I thought for sure that you'd argue with me about this, even though I wasn't as normally heavy-handed as I am on a lot of these things. And it's disappointed me that I don't even have a fight with you on it. That's even more depressing.
Yeah, well, so here, we'll leave with this. Despite all my complaints, I enjoyed the film. Despite all my complaints, I enjoyed the film.
I would have rather watched by the way, something that you can enjoy is, holy fuck, the new episodes of Black Mirror are some dark ass shit. I mean, Jesus fuck, you better have paid your psychiatrist well and get a lot of issues wrinkled out before you watch season fucking 4 of Black fucking Mirror, because man, if you thought the previous episodes and seasons were dark, this is like cranked up another notch of some dark ass shit. Really good.
I haven't watched it yet, but I intend to. So tell me this. What do you think it's like to be Tom Cruise? I can't believe you think you have an answer for this.
I think being Tom Cruise is awesome. Being Tom Cruise is like being on a permanent LSD trip.
But that's not what I mean. Go ahead, please.
What I mean, and then you tell me what else you wanted to hear from me. Where you have everyone around you helping your psychological delusions be real. So yes, Tom Cruise, you could do anything you want. You can walk on thin air if you like. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? I am that great that I can have that. So I think in some sense, it's got to be a wonderful existence. This is a person that has basically endless slaves in this cult to help his delusion, and he lives, I think, in his mind, a super happy, righteous life. Now, Tom Cruise. The other interesting thing about Tom Cruise to me is he is one of the many actors whom I dislike as a person as best I understand. Not that I've met Tom Cruise or he would deem me worthy of, you know, even spitting on me or something like that, but that I've looked at his work and seen some interviews and know a little bit about his background, and I'm not a fan of him as a person. But I hate to admit it, I watch his movies and I am fucking entertained. And the guy, as a professional in his vocation, which is an actor, does a great job for me. I enjoy his movies, bottom line. So kudos to him and his talents, but I think he gets to live a very rarefied life of a world where, for whatever reason, the world is playing along with the game that the Emperor has awesome new clothes.
Yeah, I'm sure that is true. It's not what I meant by the question. What I meant by the question is like, I mean, do you know that you're batshit insane when you're Tom Cruise? I mean, does he believe his Scientology message? And what is it like for him to interact, like when he's establishing rules for what people can and can't do around him when he's working on a project? I mean, like what is that thought process like? And then what is it like when you're another, what did I watch? And because I love his movies too. It annoys the crap out of me, but I love his movies immensely. And what is it like when you're another actor or a producer or a director, or you're someone on the set and you're not a Scientologist, and you know, and you're interacting with this person? I mean, it's just got to be surreal for everybody concerned.
So I don't think it is. And I think I have an explanation as to why. Because Hollywood's been fucked in the head for a long time on a number of levels. Like this is a field, and you know this with musicians, where it's standard to have a rider, which is like, I only want green M&Ms in my dressing room, or whatever crazy shit. And all actors are, you know, actors of a certain caliber and box office pull get away with this stuff, like any crazy shit, right? And it's also why you hear like a lot of infighting about people having some tension on set, because of they want to have limited interactions when they have these tensions, but they come in, they shoot this thing, they have their own crazy little world that they are allowed to be cocooned in as long as they continue to bring the money. And Hollywood entertains this behavior on a number of levels, and you know, some of the ones that are more publicized these days, for mostly for ill is my guess. It doesn't present any requirement of normalcy. It entertains lack of normalcy, just because of the pull, and it's ingrained. So the fact that he's loopy in one way when another actor is completely, you know, batshit in another way, it's just
that's a fair point.
It's a part of this menagerie of craziness. So I think it's fine. And my guess is, he as a professional, like when he's on set, is probably pretty professional, at least from reports I've heard. Again,
I have heard the same thing. I've actually never heard anybody complain about working for him that doesn't, or with him, that doesn't actually necessarily mean anything, as we are learning in the wider world. But yeah, I'm not actually bitching about Tom Cruise as a person. Am I bitching about, like, can anyone who is allowing so many people to live for his benefit, and I'm referring to the lower levels of Scientology who funnel their money up, some of which goes to make Tom Cruise Never Land a reality, can that person be a good person?
Can they be deluded enough? And the answer is absolutely yes. Look, I know a lot of people that go and work in Dubai and delude themselves that they're not living on the shoulders of slave labor that's imported from Sri Lanka and whatnot. They're like, these people they love the jobs they get. I'm like, these people are working as basically because there's a system of debtor's prisoner there, and they bait and switch these people in. They have no choice but to stay there and work for you. And I guarantee you that a good number of those people basically live a slave's lifestyle, and people are like, they want to be oblivious. They want to lie to themselves, and people are very successful of living in denial, not just there, but in all aspects of life. And all of us are guilty to some degree or another, right? I mean, just to get through the day, sometimes people will do that in normal aspects of life. But you know, human beings are such that they can delude themselves into almost anything, and I think that it's both a wonderful trait, some of the worst times in the world, and it can be a pretty miserable trait where it ends up causing some of the worst times in the world. So that he believes what he's dishing is a different question, and some of the viewers are talking about, you know, getting clear, and also Leah Remini has a fantastic special of exposing a lot of the abuses that reported to go on. And
hats off to her, right?
Totally. I was never a fan of hers, but I'll tell you, after that, she has a lot of courage, because there's a lot of shit that she's going through because of that, because of what she's exposing. And she says outright, like, for a long time, she totally believes this. And she had her own process of not believing it. And it took decades, and she's not a stupid person. The point is, I've said this for a long time, and I think I've said it on the show. It's our nature to brainwash one another, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. Just like by nature, human beings are hypocritical, and everyone automatically assumes hypocrisy is bad. But hypocrisy is a wonderful thing if you're a parent. Yes, I smoked, but you should not. Learn from my mistakes. Is that hypocritical? Sure, but it also is serving a good. And parents brainwash children. They say, here's our culture, here's our norms, here's our church, here's whatever. And that's not a bad thing. That's how we're predisposed to learn in a social way, and it can be done for good and for bad. But the bottom line is, if you've grown up here in the United States and you have to live in a completely different culture in Japan, it's not going to be straightforward to you. And maybe vice versa. And as we globalize, that becomes less and less a thing. But it just shows you how powerful being indoctrinated in a culture is. And it's not necessarily easy to see outside of it. So I don't know. I don't know what he in his heart believes. And there's a good question. Is he stuck in this? Even when you change and don't believe this, or are you somehow trapped by this? Leah in her specials, I think, had episodes where I think it was suggested that, maybe John Travolta, people have tried to express this. Does he actually know what he's doing or not? Or at some point, do they have enough blackmail material on you that you can't get out even when you want to? Who knows? Because they're forced to, as part of their religion, have these kind of like shrink evaluations where they're hooked up to this weird machine and basically say all their worst thoughts and deeds and whatnot, and those can forever be held against you, right? That they've got transcripts and stuff of that, and apparently they have used those things based on Leah's reports. So you don't even know. At a certain point, maybe you don't believe it and you're trapped. So I don't know. I try to, whether you believe this or not, hopefully have the benefit of the doubt to folks. I think but in his position, it's too easy to live a deluded life, delightfully deluded life, and believe it.
Probably. That's true. All right. So listen, I've got a way to close this out here. Right here or there.
Yeah, there, not here. There.
It's right there is the subscribe button. We'd love it if you hit that subscribe button. And stayed and tuned in for our episodes on the live stream.
Yes. And I'm going to leave it on that. Although I think we have a mystery with one of our episodes is peculiarly popular with a group of peculiar.
Dude, no, man, okay. There's one person on the planet who cares about this, and it's you.
I care. Anyway, I'll leave it with that teaser. But yes, thank you. Please subscribe if if you're not numb yet, and we appreciate your viewage. And we're hoping that this finds you on the beginning side of a happy new year. And on that popular topic, we will see you next week.